Hey everybody, this is Beelit, and this is going to be a little mini discussion on Mortal Kombat 11. Now, at the time of recording this video, the game is roughly about a month away from being released. And one of the big topics that has been coming up and is starting to get a little bit more buzz behind it too is the idea that Mortal Kombat 11 may be simplified, quote unquote simplified. And the reason for this comes from what we've seen in the gameplay, but a lot of what we hear about the gameplay from the Combat Cast, the streams that the developers hold where they talk about different characters, highlight them, show off some gameplay, stuff like that. One of the things that people have come to is that this game may very well be much more streamlined, much more simplified in its gameplay. And that worries people. And here are the reasons why. And I want to kind of discuss these a little bit because they do carry some weight. But before we get into the ways that it may very well be simplified, I wanted to kind of tackle some of the arguments that it's not going to be overly simplified, that there's a lot of added depth to the game. And these points, I think, are half true. Yes, there is depth because of these things, but that does not mean that the game is automatically that you're gaining more depth overall just because these things have added layers of depth. If you're losing depth in other ways, you can still have a net positive or a net loss. So it really kind of depends on how much you're gaining, how much you're losing. But one of the big things that people talk about is the fatal blow mechanic. The fatal blow mechanic, while it is different, I personally don't view a whole lot of depth behind it. Yes, there is a mind game behind it, but it's not a particularly difficult mind game. It's not a particularly in-depth mind game. It's more of a mind game of, do I really need this extra damage? If yes, use Fatal Blow. If not, do not use Fatal Blow and use it for a time when you do really need the extra damage. That's not a ton of depth, to be completely honest. Also, there's no meter aspect, which we will get to that later on. But yes, there is something to it, but I would have a hard time entertaining the argument that there is a ton of depth to it. Moving on from the fatal blow or the crushing blows. The crushing blows I do like. I think that's really cool. However, very much like the fatal blow, the crushing blow depth is pretty freaking similar. It's you're fulfilling requirements, and so in fulfilling the requirements, sometimes your opponent will sometimes be able to read, well, why did they do that less damaging ender? Oh, they must be trying to build for their crushing blow. That means I need to look out for this coming up, and then maybe that can open up a situation that otherwise the other player wouldn't have gotten a lot from. For instance, I forgot the guy's name, Gigas or Giras or whatever, the time grappler dude. He has a string where he can actually use a fatal blow, or not a fatal blow, gosh dang it, where he can actually use a crushing blow, and it's a mix-up inside of his strings. So I forgot the exact way that it works, but essentially he can use a string in a certain way, and if he goes for one option for the ender, if it hits, it can become a crushing blow and do an increased amount of damage. And if he goes for the different option, he might get like a pop-up for a combo or something along those lines. But it creates an added layer of, oh crud, the crushing blow requirements are fulfilled. This mix-up is going to hurt. So, normally I would just, and I'm just spitballing, I don't know if this is the exact way it works, but normally if I just take the overhead, then, at least I just take a little bit of damage, but I'm not going to get, corner carried and take a chunk of damage and then put in a situation where I got to block on wake up again. I can just kind of, get a little bit of space, took a little bit of damage, but I'm still relatively okay. And that situation can now turn into, I really don't want to take this overhead. So am I going to take the overhead crushing blow, or am I going to take the low pop-up thing? Which one is he going to do? Because he has the crushing blow now. So now it's a real 50-50. I really have to think about this. That is cool. That is unique. But it'll only happen one time in the match. Then it's done. And it has to be these things that are fulfilled, requirements fulfilled for them. And even still with that, yes, it is added depth. But is it enough added depth? Let's look at some of the stuff that we're possibly losing in the depth department. Meter gain. I mentioned about this before. I kind of touched on it, but you don't build meter in the traditional fighting game sense anymore. It's given to you, and it's regulated, and it's on timers depending on what actions you do. It's out of your control. It's incredibly different, and some would say simplified. And there is undoubtedly a loss in the player's interaction with their meter because they don't build it, because their actions don't influence it directly. Yes, they influence when they use it, but they don't influence how much they gain. It's very, very different. It's almost apart. It's not dependent on gameplay. The meter is not dependent on gameplay. It's dependent on time. And with that, there's a loss in the interaction that a player has with meter. And a lot of people would argue that is simplification. And I agree. The way that we have seen it used in Mortal Kombat, it is much less player control than in most other fighting games in general, not just NRS games. And that can be a little bit concerning. Further than that, combos are, let's be honest here. Combos are a lot of times some of the biggest reasons people play games and play fighting games. Having a character that does these cool freaking combos, like that's a driving force behind you playing a character, behind you enjoying a character. I cannot tell you how many times I've gone into training mode and have this in Dragon Ball FighterZ, where I had Piccolo when I first started the game, and I wanted something cool to do. I wanted something fun that looked flashy, and then I found the Hellzone grenade loops, and I practiced the crap out of that. And I freaking loved it. I loved every second of it. And then using it in a real match, I felt amazing. And like during the first few weeks of that game's life, when people are still seeing all these new things, when I had Hellzone grenade loops and I was using them on people would send me messages saying, "That was so cool. I can't believe you could do that with Piccolo. That was awesome. Thank you for showing me that." That made me feel freaking amazing. It was part of the entertainment in the fighting game. It was kind of this feedback of the effort that you put in to the game, the time that you put into it, being rewarded to you. It's not the most important thing on a gameplay level, but it is a pretty important thing on a satisfaction level. In the same way that, for a looter shooter, you would want to have cool weapon skins. You want to have cool combos, right? You want to have combos that look flashy, that are fun and unique. And maybe you have one combo that it's not the most damaging in the world, but it's long. And there's a strange satisfaction in making your opponent have to sit through your long freaking combo without getting to play the game with their hands off the controller, just wondering when it's their turn again, And aside from that, and yes, the developers have said that the combo game has been toned down a little bit. And you can clearly see that in the gameplay. And I am going a little bit further just because in this aspect I haven't seen anything that makes me believe otherwise. But One of the things with combos is sometimes you would want a combo that did better corner carry. Sometimes you would want a combo that did better meter gain. Well, of course, those don't exist anymore. And then sometimes you have your pure raw damage combos. I'm not seeing that so far. And look, it's early. It is very early. Let's be fair. But I'm still not seeing that. And I'm not seeing anything that leads me to believe that a lot of that stuff is lying in wait. So is that simplification? Yeah, it kind of is. And it's simplification. Yeah, it may not be the most important thing to, the decision making of the fighting game and the actual raw gameplay of it, the interactions between the players, but it's still a pretty important part. It's one of the things that you enjoy in a fighting game. And for it to be simplified, it feels almost like you're losing something, Aside from that, another really big thing is execution. Now, execution does relate to combos a little bit, but execution across the board almost seems to be down. The problem with a low barrier to execution is that it enables the thing, I think, in fighting games that I hate the most, and that is counterpicking. There are always going to be imbalances in characters. There are always going to be characters that do really well against another character just because of the tools that they have. The tools are going to interact differently, and some tools work really well against other tools, and vice versa. Sometimes some tools just cannot work against other tools. But in a game where there's a reasonable level of execution, there's an unwillingness to go to a different character. There's an unwillingness to abandon a character because you've put time into that character. You are starting to, you can tap into their potential more than if you just went over to this other character for 5 minutes. You're not going to be able to play them to the same level that you can play your main, But when the execution gets lowered, well, it becomes a lot easier to play that other character. It becomes a lot easier to play anyone. And that opens up the counterpicking. Now, there's always going to be that interplay, as I mentioned, but this is how I kind of feel about it. If you have a main character that just so happens to beat someone else's main character, oh well, that's just how it is. There's always going to be that in there, but there's something honest about it if those are just your main characters. It's not my fault that the character I love and that I play against everybody just so happens to have an easier time against the character that you love and that you play against everybody. That's just the luck of the draw. That's just where we got today. But when I play against you and then you beat me, and then I say, well, I am just going to pick a character that essentially beats you in the character select screen with minimal effort, and I'm able to do this because 2 hours ago I went and learned 3 strings, I think there's a problem. I think that execution barrier is set too low. Personally, it defeats kind of the spirit of competition for me. For me, competition is not, I know this is going to sound really freaking stupid and preachy, but the best competition is almost, it doesn't matter who wins, really. It just matters how well they played. There's a competitor who seeks to win by being better than the other person, and then there's a competitor who seeks to win by any means necessary. And I don't like the competitor who only cares about the win. I like the competitor who cares about the spirit of the game, who cares about trying to outplay the person, trying to be better. And I don't think you become better by picking a tool that automatically beats the other tool. And now I know I'm going off a little bit more and I'm exaggerating a little bit. Just because you pick a different character doesn't automatically mean that you're going to win. You're not really winning in the character select screen, but you're stacking all the cards in your favor. And I don't like that. I don't want that to be an option. And unfortunately, if the execution barrier does get low in a fighting game, that is very common to happen. And as a matter of fact, we have seen it happen. It's been happening for quite some time. And if the barrier gets even lower, we will never get back to a time where we don't see this counterpicking. So we have to kind of make a decision. Are we okay with that? Is that what we want our games to be? Or is it time to push back? Is it time to make our games a little bit harder in order to see a little bit of better play? So that is my rant for Mortal Kombat 11. I hope you guys enjoyed it. And if you have any thoughts on this whole situation, whether or not you think that the game is being simplified, maybe you do, maybe you don't, go ahead and let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section below. I'd love to hear them. I will see you guys next time. Thanks for watching.